Only on 12, heartbreak in Norwalk today as a local doctor talks publicly for the first time about the death of a close friend in the Malaysia air disaster, a fellow HIV specialist and researcher. News 12 Connecticut's Frank Recchia joins us from World Health Clinicians on West Avenue, an international center for AIDS and HIV research. Frank, you spoke exclusively with Dr. Gary Blick.
Becky, Dr. Blick says he has lost one of the greatest friends he has ever had, and he says the world has lost a doctor whom the World Health Organization has repeatedly recognized as a great pioneer in AIDS and HIV research.
I'm still crying inside right now. I cried all the way home last night. I cried in the way to work this morning. When I told my staff what happened, I'm still on the verge of tears.
Dr. Gary Blick of Stamford was a close friend and colleague of Dr. Joep Lange. Dr. Lange was one of the 100 people on the Malaysian airliner on their way to an international AIDS conference in Australia when their plane was shot down over Ukraine.
These were men and women who had dedicated their own lives to saving the lives of others.
You just feel empty and really saddened by the whole thing. And then you even decide, do I even want to go to this conference? I'm about to leave in the next, I'm leaving this evening for the conference.
In the end, Dr. Blick decided to leave for Australia, where there will be a special tribute to his friend, Dr. Lange.
He would have opened the conference. He would have been the one to announce Bill Clinton doing the keynote speech at the conference.
He says Lange was a great storyteller.
So I couldn't remember the stories, but he would be keeping everybody in hysterics throughout the whole night, just, with his good sense of humor, always going back to the fact that, HIV was where he came from and where he wants to finish.
Dr. Blick says it's hard to accept.
It's just so sad
that his friend's dream was cut short.
When you die from a surface-to-air missile in a war zone that shoots down your plane, it's just such a tragedy because they just ended his life so drastically and so quickly, I'm sure there was so much more he needed to give to the world.
Dr. Blick tells us former President Bill Clinton will lead a special memorial for Dr. Lange at the AIDS conference on Sunday. He also tells us that Dr. Lange's partner, Jacqueline, was also killed in the air disaster, along with several other AIDS doctors he has known and worked with for many years. In Norwalk, Frank Recchia, News 12 Connecticut. We're in the office of Dr. Gary Blick, an internationally known AIDS specialist who has a practice here in Norwalk. He's from Stamford. He is grieving today the loss of a very close friend, Dr. Joep Lange from the Netherlands, who was killed in the Malaysian airline flight that was shot down over Ukraine. Dr. Blick had known him for almost 20 years and said they had a very close personal relationship. He's concerned right now that Dr. Lange's wife may have been on the plane as well. He's eagerly waiting to find out all of the names that were on the passenger manifest. We're going to have this heartbreaking local angle on the Malaysian air disaster coming up later. For now, in Norwalk, Frank Recchia, Mobile 12. We're in the office of internationally known AIDS specialist Dr. Gary Blick. His practice is here in Norwalk. He's from Stamford. Dr. Blick is grieving today the loss of a close friend whom he had known for almost 20 years, Dr. Joep Lange from the Netherlands, an international AIDS specialist himself who was on that Malaysian airliner that was shot down over Ukraine. Dr. Blick says he has not stopped crying. The grieving process is going to be long and painful, he tells us. He, like Dr. Lange, is on his way right now to Melbourne, where an international AIDS conference is going to be held. He says it's really tragic that Dr. Lange was on his way to this conference doing so much good for the world when the plane was shot down by a surface-to-air missile. We're going to have the heartbreaking local angle on this international story coming up later. For now, in Norwalk, Frank Recchia, News 12 Connecticut.